FanDuel.com, Dave Lochran and Adam Shaw. A 10-game slate for you. It's Friday, January 4th, 2019. Glad to be here. Glad to have you with us, of course. It's going to be an interesting one, Adam, because we've already gotten some news, but we're still waiting on some other news that could be pretty major. So before we jump into any of this, before we get into the game-by-game analysis here, let's just take a quick look at who's out, and then I'm going to toss it to you just to get some quick initial analysis here. Kyrie Irving, Marcus Morris, both out for Boston. This is the news. I'm not the pending news right now. LeBron James obviously is still out. And then Bobby Portis is out for Chicago. That's important. We'll explain why in a little bit. And then the same like Nwaba and Jijic and stuff like that. It's kind of unimportant. But Derrick Rose went from doubtful to questionable. Jeff Teague is starting. And we have a couple of other questionable players such as Turner, who is looking more towards probable. Now I don't know. Justin Holiday is on his way to Memphis and is doubtful to play for Memphis today. I don't see any way he plays. And then, of course, Kyle Kuzma is questionable, but didn't participate in shoot-around. So I have him leaning more towards doubtful. A lot of moving parts.
Yeah, Ricky Rubio also questionable. Not sure if you mentioned that.
No, I didn't. Thank you.
Yeah. A lot of moving parts there. I'm glad we got the Marcus Morris news at least.
Yeah, that's good too. Now, yeah, well, kind of. Now we have to guess which one of Hayward, Brown, or Tatum is going to have a decent game. That should be enjoyable.
Yeah.
Do you know that Gordon Hayward has 2 games all season with 20 or more points, and both of them came against Minnesota?
That's interesting. I did see them. No, I was gonna say I did see that he said that he's feeling better as far as like lateral movement goes. So maybe he stops sucking so much.
That's good. Yeah, it's tough though because he shot 14 for 18. I'm not exactly expecting him to replicate that.
Yeah, I mean we'll talk about it obviously when we get to that game.
Yes, we will. All right, Cleveland and Utah. Let's just hop into the game by game here. This one shouldn't take all that long. As you mentioned, Ricky Rubio's questionable here. And then the same, Nwaba, Jijic, they're out. Grayson Allen's out. Dellavedova, questionable. Not a lot of big news on the Cleveland side, but the Rubio news could be impactful. We should definitely get it, hopefully during this show. And if we don't, we'll at least have it before lock. Is that something that's going to change the way you're making lineups here with Dante Exum being 3,900 and Donnie Mitchell being reason? Honestly, I'd probably just go towards Exum. I don't even know if I'd have much love for Mitchell here, but what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that news is important just because even with the news coming out of Boston, there's still really a lack of value on this slate, or at least of a value that we can feel really confident in. So having Dante Exum out there at $3,900 would certainly open some more stuff up, give us another cheap guy that we can use. Mitchell and Ingles, I think, would also get boosts, but they're at least in that mid range where they still wouldn't be guys I don't think that I'm like jamming in the lineups, especially because, while Cleveland is a really, really bad team in terms of defensive efficiency, they play at such a slow pace that it doesn't necessarily translate into a lot of really good fantasy games. Like if you look at, they're one of the least efficient defenses, but if you look at the actual points that they allow per game, they rank in the middle of the pack just because they play so slow. So for the mid-range guys, it's still not a great spot. But if Rubio were to be ruled out and you can get a sub 4K Dante Exum, then it becomes really appealing there.
It does. And with Exum, Dante Exum is not somebody that I have a whole lot of faith in. But as you mentioned, the value is not deep. I mean, I was writing up James Johnson today on a 10-game slate. So it gives you an idea of how shallow we are at some positions. But with Dante Exum, you have a guy who played 26 minutes against the Knicks with Rubio out, had 13 and 13, and basically did all of that in the first half. That game was a monster blowout from the jump. Again, I'm not expecting 13 assists, Adam, but at that price, you're not going to need that as long as he sees. I don't know. What do you think? If Rubio's out, I don't have a problem giving him around 30 minutes.
Yeah, I would give him Rubio's 32, and then I would give Neto Exum's 16.
Right. Yeah, so that's pretty solid in that regard. But what about, and just kind of elaborate, what about Mitchell on this slate that has a decent amount of guards?
Not really getting him too much. I don't think I'm pulling up the initial DraftKings crunch that I did right before the show, but not really someone that's popping out for me. Like it's a completely kind of like at 7,200, he's just kind of like a completely neutral play for me.
Yeah, me too. That's how I feel for the, well, no, I don't feel that way for the rest of Utah. Outside of Exum, I don't have anyone that I would like a lot. Mitchell would be fine, and the rest of the team I don't have much interest in at all. Is there anyone outside of Exum, assuming Rubio's out, of course, or in the event that he's out, and maybe some peripheral or some Mitchell as a secondary guy? Anyone else that jumps off at you?
Yeah, I mean Ingles I think is fine. Not someone that I'm jamming into lineups, but 5,300 is fine for him. Gobert's price tag is nice at 7,900. The issue is just that there's a lot of really good centers on this slate, and Tristan Thompson being back does make the Cleveland front court a bit more formidable. So, really, just nothing from this team that I expect to have tons of, unless Rubio gets ruled out, and then I think it would probably just be Exum.
All right, sounds good to me then. What about Cleveland?
um, no, I mean it's
All right.
yeah. There's really nothing in abundance for me. Like the team is more or less healthy. You have Rodney Hood back. You have Patrick McCaw in the rotation now. Larry Nance played nothing but backup center last game. I have Thompson projected for 26 minutes, Nance for 22 at center. You do have Matthew Dellavedova, who's questionable, which if he's out, maybe helps to solidify Colin Sexton's minutes, but it's just still such an unappealing spot that I don't think that would get me much Sexton on this slate anyway.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to get there, and I don't think you need to, especially given that this is a Utah team earlier in the season. They really weren't playing that well, offensively or defensively. And I've been using, since the start of December a lot lately. If you're wondering why, it's because it will take some teams a little while to get things going. So oftentimes it takes a while to get your rotations where you want them to be, guys returning from injury from the off season, so on and so forth. So I don't mind using the last 30, 35 days as a point of reference when looking at whether or not, or more so, just whether teams are improving or teams are getting worse, teams are staying the same. It's something I like to look at. And when you look at Utah since the start of December, they've been markedly better pretty much everywhere, too. So you look at them in defensive rating, they're third best in the league, behind only Utah and Indiana. Even their offensive rating has improved to 12th best in basketball. And in pace, they actually rank 11th in pace since the start of December, Adam. So that's the interesting thing. A team that has definitely bolstered their defense recently, but is not even 15th in pace on the season. They're not this crawling team like we've seen in the past, just for future reference.
Yeah, it's much more the reason that the matchup against them is not appealing is because of how good they are defensively, not so much their pace. It used to be that they played really slow and they were good defensively, but they do at least play at a reasonable pace now.
Yeah, how good they are defensively and how bad Cleveland is offensively.
Right, and that's why I kind of laughed when you asked about Cleveland because it's not that none of these guys can have a good game, but it's that you have essentially a full rotation where these guys don't need to play 38 minutes a night anymore, and they're all just really bad per minute producers with the exception of Larry Nance when Thompson's out, but Thompson's not out, so that's completely irrelevant.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty much. And then also Cleveland, when you look at defensive rating, dead last in the game, allowing two more points per 100 possessions than the next worst team, which is the Knicks. So there's a really bad defense. It's also a Cleveland team that, from a pace standpoint, plays at a crawling pace, second slowest in the entire league. So things have changed. You got no LeBron there anymore. You're just a bad team. But I also find it funny. You've mentioned this about Brooklyn when it comes to rebounding and playing at a slow pace. Cleveland plays at the second slowest pace, but is allowing the 10th most points. They're really, really bad.
Right.
All right.
But what happens is you do, not necessarily in this game, but something to pay attention to is that you do tend to see players get priced up because of the matchup against Cleveland. And it's not as good a fantasy matchup as it is a real life matchup because of the pace. So if guys are getting priced up because Cleveland sucks defensively, it'll often make them actually overpriced because of how slow Cleveland plays.
Well, and that's why defensive rating can be a very deceiving statistic, because it's it's points allowed per 100 possessions. And if they're playing down in pace, you're still not getting that many possessions each game, depending on the team and who they're playing. So you have to be careful with defensive rating, but generally it's a decent jumping off point just to get an
Right.
idea of how bad they are.
Yeah, and for
All
anyone
right.
listening, that's why I know I do it. I think you do also. But like we'll reference defensive rating and then we'll reference pace basically in the same sentence. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just to give you an idea because if they're not efficient defensively and they play fast, you basically have a gold mine. If they're really slow and they're not efficient, then you're kind of getting like a middling spot.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why I don't mind referencing points per game at times either, because Atlanta might only rank 23rd in defensive rating and not last, but they allow more points than any team in the entire league.
Right,
So
exactly.
yeah, more possessions, more opportunity, more scoring, more peripherals. Boom. All right, let's move on here. I'm tired of talking about Utah and Cleveland, Chicago and Indiana. You and I had a good discussion about this earlier today. I also uh, touched on it in depth in the deeper dive. The Bulls are 6.5-point dogs at home. By the way, 200.5 total. Two teams. We talk about pace. Two teams that definitely play down in pace. As I mentioned, the Pacers have the best defensive rating over the past or since the start of December. They're also allowing the fewest points per game since the start of December. So not exactly a favorable matchup here. You take it a step further and you look at the Pacers. They are playing at a bottom. Oh no, actually, it looks like they've come up a bit.
Yeah, they're like
16th. Yeah, 16th in pace over that span. Number one in defensive rating, less than 100 points per 100 possessions. But anyway, let's get into the Chicago discussion. I'm going to set it up for you and then take it away. So there's no Justin Holiday. Jabari Parker hasn't played since the 13th of December. Then you have Chandler Hutchison. And Bobby Portis is out. Chandler Hutchison had been backing up Markkanen, essentially taking all those backup power forward minutes. But Justin Holiday was a 35-minute per game guy, so you have to assume that Chandler Hutchison is going to soak up the majority of those minutes at the 3. And the only thing that could mean is either these guys see massive minutes or that Parker re-enters the rotation.
I think Parker re-enters the rotation because the reason for Parker not playing had been that Jim Boylan said he has 3 power forwards and he has no use for them. And there were actually reports recently too that Parker was looking pretty good in practice. So I think Parker gets back in the rotation. I don't think it's useful for fantasy. I think he plays 16 to 18 minutes backing up Lauri Markkanen. And I think Markkanen plays around 34 minutes with some of that time coming at center. But I think that Parker gets back in the rotation. I think you get around 30 minutes from Chandler Hutchison, which he's $3,000 playing 30 minutes is fine. He's not a productive player. It's not a nice matchup. So not anything I'm actually excited about. And then I expect that you get, Wendell Carter playing 28 to 30 minutes. You get Robin Lopez, backing him up.
Yeah, and to be clear, mentioning Jabari Parker coming into the rotation is not so we can decide whether or not he's playable, but more so to get a better gauge of how many minutes Markkanen and Hutchison are going to play.
Right, exactly.
Now, it's not an easy spot or easy matchup. Hutchison is, as you mentioned, minimum salary across the board. I'm putting him around 30, 32 minutes here. So if you wanted to play Hutchison, hoping that he can give you what I don't know, God, 0.7 fantasy points per minute in a tough matchup, I get it. I mean, he's dirt cheap. I also wouldn't be surprised to see him have 10 fantasy points across 30 minutes. I really wouldn't. But when it comes to Markkanen, you look at the numbers on the year, they're not bad. But we definitely have to consider the fact that, Levine is back and not limited anymore. Chris Dunn is back and not limited anymore. It's going to and has taken significant usage away from Lauri Markkanen. How are you targeting him here, if at all?
Yeah, not really getting to much Markkanen. The usage has come down, and at 6,500 on DraftKings, it's kind of just a really, really mediocre price point. Not that I'm particularly interested in anyone from the Chicago team, but Chris Dunn is the guy that I'm getting the most of just because he's actually less expensive than Markkanen and LaVine. I think he plays around 34 minutes here. He's got a 35% assist percentage alongside Zach LaVine, which is good to see. Only an 18.5% usage rate, but he's the guy that's actually projecting the best for me out of the entire group.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I don't think I'll have a lot of them, but I can see why among all of those guys he would be a reasonable play. I think Markkanen gets a lot of, if this game stays even remotely close, I could see Markkanen playing upwards of 39 minutes here. I would not be surprised. I really wouldn't. But I don't know what he does with those minutes. He's still the guy that I like most of these Bulls, just because I feel very confident that given that Justin Holiday's gone and Jabari, even if he returns, is not going to get a lot of run. I think Markkanen's minutes are going to be very, very high here. It's just what can he do with them? If he can, see around 25% usage, I'd be very, very happy. I just don't know if that's going to be the case. His usage, his field goal attempts have come down a decent amount since LaVine got healthy. What about Indiana here? No real word yet. Nothing, no confirmation at least on Miles Turner. So I guess we'll just assume that he's playing. And if you want to talk about what would happen if he's not playing, I think we have a pretty good idea, but lay it out for us. And if there's anyone on the Pacers that you're looking at.
Yeah, there's not really anything on Indiana, assuming that Turner's in. Since the coaching change in Chicago actually is 10th in defensive rating and playing at the 5th slowest pace. So they have made significant strides defensively. They're an entirely unappealing matchup in terms of pace, and nobody on Indiana is really underpriced. So if Turner's in, there's really nothing there that I'm that interested in. If Turner's out, then obviously Domantas Sabonis becomes a good play, just because you get more minutes from Turner being out, and he's such a monster on a per minute basis. But like you, I'm assuming that Turner is in, and if that's the case, I'm getting essentially no Indiana.
Yeah, neither am I. Sabonis would be in play. Do you think though what do you think his minutes would be here if there was no Turner?
North of 30.
All right. Yeah, I'd put him around 31, 32.
Yeah.
I don't see crazy minutes, but definitely, low 30s. All right, let's keep it going. If any news breaks, we'll be the first to let you know right here on the Deeper Dive, paying attention to all of that. A few big pieces that we're waiting on here. So, and Matthew Dellavedova being out is not one of them. He is out, by the way. He is out, but that nobody cares. Anyway, Minnesota and Orlando. Minnesota at home hosting the Orlando Magic. 5-point favorites here, 213.5 total. Derrick Rose was doubtful. Now he's questionable. Jeff Teague is starting. What do you think of a guy like Jeff Teague today, knowing that we saw Tyus Jones average 37 fantasy points in these games with Rose out? Now Covington's out. He has a 44% usage rate with Rose and Butler off the court this year. And although he hasn't played many minutes at all with Rose, Butler, and Teague off the floor, he's got 31% usage, 47% assist rate, and 1.34 fantasy points per minute. Very, very low minute totals there. Just want to get your take on Teague being back. Let's assume he's not limited here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have him kind of as a completely neutral play because I've been projected for 32 minutes. He missed like a couple of weeks earlier this year, came back and in his first game played 35 minutes. So I'm not thinking he's going to be too limited. So I have him at 32 here. Alongside Cat, without those guys on the floor, he does see a predictable decrease in usage percentage, but the assist percentage is still up at 43.5%, and it's obviously a okay matchup against Orlando. So if I get some Teague, that's fine, but as far as guys from Minnesota go, like it's tough to prioritize him over Karl Anthony Towns at a different price point, Wiggins at the same price point. So kind of my third option from Minnesota.
Agreed. Luke says Teague probably getting 25 minutes or less. Do you know who his coach is, bruh?
I'll say, is there a source on that, or is that just treating Tibbs like he's a normal
guess.
person?
Yeah, right. Teague could get his left leg amputated, return, and Tibbs plays him for 36 minutes. So
right. We all said the same thing, but that's why I mentioned that he missed 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks earlier this year and then came back. Like we all said the same thing. Like Teague probably plays 24 minutes, and then he played 36.
Right. And he doesn't play as many minutes as as Towns or as Wiggins, but I'm still projecting Teague at 32 minutes. Unless we hear something
Right.
to the contrary, I'm going to put him right around where he normally plays. But also, there's no Derrick Rose either. I have a little bit more interest in Teague than you do, assuming we expect him to be fine here on minutes. I just think he's going to get a ton of facilitating duties, and I think he's going to have to shoot a little bit more. I'm not huge on him, but if I end up with some Teague, I'll be okay with that. Again, if Tyus Jones can put up those numbers and we were playing him at 56, 5,800, then I don't think Teague at this price point is crazy either. But definitely a secondary play. I'm not forcing him in the lineups by any stretch, and I think there are some better options in this price range. I don't mind him, though. What about Towns? He's still sub 10K on DraftKings, 10-6 on FanDuel. Where are you at with Towns in this matchup against Nick Vucevic and the Magic?
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy from Minnesota that I'm getting the most of right now. Teague being back takes some of the appeal away because we had seen Towns doing we see the assist percentage jump for Towns when he's playing without Teague. Teague being back takes some of that away. If Rose is back, then the usage rate takes a hit as well. But, I think at a sub 10K price tag on DraftKings, I haven't run my fantasy or my FanDuel crunches yet, but on DraftKings, I was getting about 25% of Towns in my initial crunches, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I mean, He's 10K. I have him projected for over 50 fantasy points. I don't have anyone on this. Well, anyone outside of Giannis projected over 60 on this slate, and there's not a ton of great value. So, getting that upside from Cat at a sub 10K price tag is really, really appealing.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, there was a strange glitch. Might have just been on my end, though. All right, good. Yeah, it is very appealing. You know what I was surprised by?
Hey, Lofty. You're doing that little delay thing again.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Huh. So it's still delaying, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. Everything's crystal clear, though.
Now it's not.
Well, yeah, now he's not in here. He'll be right back. We ran into this issue for our show.
So
there you go.
Yep. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe it's my end. Maybe it's the host. Whatever. Adam, I found it weird, and it's not really something that concerns me just because I know that Teague returning doesn't really affect Towns much outside of the fact that I do think he'll see a couple less potential assists per game. His assist opportunities were actually really high with Teague out. And look, Teague is no amazing player, but he's a better player than Tyus Jones. Rose being off the court is the biggest thing for Towns. Just look at his numbers without him. Spectacular. Usage is very high. But I found it funny that the Orlando Magic are allowing the fourth fewest points to opposing centers this year. I just think that has to be more so matchups. I can't. Vooch is not a good defensive big. I don't see. I don't know. Maybe Mo Bamba's doing a better job, but I don't see this as a difficult or concerning matchup. And even if it was, I'd probably still have plenty of Towns because of the situation that he's in.
Yeah, I mean, I think Vooch has improved this year just based on, Zach Lowe tweets and stuff like that. I think Vooch has been doing a much better job defensively, and also just some comments from Vooch about working hard on that aspect of his game. But it's, I care more about the opportunity and the upside than anything. So I still like Towns.
Yeah, Ricky asked in chat, do you lose faith in Wiggins because Teague is back? No, I lose faith in Wiggins because he's Andrew Wiggins, and I don't say that I don't even say that sarcastically. I'm serious, and this is what I mean. Teague is not going to take anything away from Wiggins, right? Because Wiggins is already a dude who, from a facilitating standpoint, does virtually nothing. His 3 or 4 opportunities to rack up a dime or to rack up assists per game are not going to change because Teague is in over Tyus Jones. Not going to make a difference. The issue with Wiggins is simply that he's so scoring dependent that he can score 31 points like he did last game in 43 minutes, Adam, and still finish with 38 fantasy points.
Yeah, no, that was going to be my exact answer, was that, I still feel just as uncomfortable in Andrew Wiggins as I would with or without Teague.
Right. What about Josh Okogie? He was just spectacular last game. Really exciting performance from this stud. 0 for 4 shooting, 24 minutes, 13 fantasy points. The only thing I'll say before I throw it over to you is he did lose minutes due to his third foul, and was on pace, even if he didn't play in that fourth quarter until the end. He was on pace to play around 30 minutes had he closed out the second half when he returned, but instead only played 2 minutes in his second rotation because he caught foul number 3. Go ahead.
Were you talking about Okogie? Sorry, I was reading about Josh showering in chat.
Okay. Yeah, I said Okogie was terrible and is terrible, but he was actually on pace to play 30 minutes last game, but the foul trouble limited his second rotation to 2 instead of 8 minutes.
Yeah, if Rose is out, then I have Okogie projected for 30 to 32 minutes here. He got in foul trouble, like you said. Anthony Tolliver played like
Tolliver.
Tolliver.
All right, I like it.
I'm glad that's like the one thing I said on a show that you catch. Plays, he played like 26 minutes. I think that you get similar run there. I cut a few minutes off of Andrew
This is coming
Wiggins.
from the same guy that just told me, sorry, can you repeat that? I was reading chat.
Yeah, so I agree with you. Okogie plays like 30 to 32 minutes. He doesn't really do anything when he's out there. Play him if you want.
Would you rather Josh Okogie or Hutchison?
Jeez. Hutchison just
I'll
because
take the $900 savings, man.
Right, exactly. He's like 33% less expensive and going to run around the floor just as effectively as Josh Okogie.
Right. No one stands on the perimeter as good as these guys.
Right.
I don't expect much, but like if you're desperate for value, this is what it comes down to, though, Adam. First of all, Rose definitely needs to be out. Second of all, because it'll be very easy for Tibbs to just run this rotation of Teague, Rose, Wiggins, and then Taj or Saric and Towns for really heavy minutes, right? So Okogie's minutes will be cut in half if Rose is back, but if he's out, fine. I think what it comes down to is Rubio going to play? Is Kyle Kuzma going to play? These are the things that can make Okogie and Hutchison either grin and bear it, choke it down type value plays, or guys that shouldn't even be on your radar at all.
Right, exactly. Like I have Kuzma projected out right now, and that just makes it
Me
so
too.
I don't need those guys in any way, shape, or form.
Generally speaking, when you don't go through shoot around, I'm going to project you as down. Not out, but out in the projections.
Right.
I'm not obviously confirming anything, but you don't go through shoot around. You had MRIs done on your back. It doesn't sound good.
Right, and he also missed 3/4 of the last game. Like
exactly.
So it's not like he woke up with a stiff back and he's seeing how he feels. He legitimately got hurt last game. Now he missed shoot around 2 days later. I'm assuming he doesn't play.
Right, and had MRIs on that back, so it was severe enough for them to check to see if there was any actual structural damage or something.
Right.
All right. Let's talk about Orlando. Are you interested in anybody here?
I think Vooch
are up there.
What'd you say?
I said Vooch price is getting up there, but he's been so good.
Right. So Vooch, I think he's clearly behind Towns in terms of a projection. I did mention this morning with Josh that where I could see ending up with some, just because even though Towns is the better projected player, they both have very similar ceilings. And if our ownership projections, a half hour before lock ended up being where Towns is one of the highest owned guys on the slate and nobody's on Vooch, I could see having some pivots to Vooch. But as far as optimal plays go, not really. I think Aaron Gordon is perfectly reasonable playing big minutes here in a fine matchup against Minnesota. But beyond him and Vooch, there's not really much that I like.
Yeah. I'll just throw this guy out there because I expect his minutes to climb back up. Last game was a monster blowout, but DJ Augustine is still really cheap. If no value opens up, you can do worse than Augustine. His usage has been increasing recently. He's been having some decent games, kind of ride the wave till it crashes mentality with him. I'm not excited about him. You can kind of never be, but just like Adam, last game, I mean, they won by 28 points. The game was never competitive. Game prior to that, though, 38 minutes against Phoenix. Overtime game, played 35 minutes in regulation, 41 minutes overall. If Augustine plays 35 minutes, and assuming this game stays close, he could be a decent value option. It's just, he's still DJ Augustine.
Yeah, and the individual matchup for him is a little bit better with Teague starting too. Would
Yeah.
much rather have someone going against Jeff Teague than Tyus Jones.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's keep it going then. Here's a good one. Memphis and Brooklyn. We will have some pieces of this, but mostly on one side. Memphis Grizzlies obviously favored at home here. Mike Conley said to a Grizzlies beat writer, I forget his name, that he has more flexibility in his shoulder now. Memphis 4-point favorites, 204 total. You know, the thing about Conley, then we'll get to Gasol, is this is his first game of his career where he had no points on 8 or more field goal attempts. 28 minutes, 0 for 8 shooting, no free throw attempts, 0 points, and 3.75 DraftKings points. It was a heinous performance from Mike Conley. I'm assuming some of that had to do with his shoulder. Now he faces Brooklyn at home. His price on DraftKings specifically has fallen to 7,400. I want to say I like him at this price, but I am still a little bit concerned about that injury. If he's talking about, I got some flexibility back and he's coming off a complete goose egg. What are your thoughts on Conley here, who's expected to play?
Right. I think the price tag is fine, but what's making it really tough for me to get to him, aside from anything injury related, is with the Boston news, you do get a couple of guard plays there. And that obviously you can play instead of Conley. You have a couple high upside guards that we'll talk about. It's just kind of tough for me to get to Conley, especially because you also have guys cheaper, like Chris Dunn or Jeff Teague or, whoever in that price range, where they're not great plays, but they're still, $1,400 less expensive and can give you a 30+ point game in the same range where we would expect Conley to be. So I think it's a fine spot. I think it's a fine price tag. It's just not anything that I'm prioritizing here.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Conley. I just don't think I'm going to get there too often. If the 74 is very reasonable here, and it's in a spot that doesn't scare me at all. I do think this game stays close. The injury is enough, though, or the concern of an injury is enough for me to say, you know what, I don't expect to ever lose a tournament or lose on a night because I don't have Mike Conley. And that's kind of a way to look at it. So I had more interest earlier in the day, but I'm worried after seeing some of this news that this could be problematic. What about Marc Gasol here? He's $8,100 on DraftKings, which, look, not a bad price. $8,400 on FanDuel, but I could make a very similar argument for a lot of other guys that are at very good prices and very good matchups. So where do you rank Gasol amongst these good centers that are pretty bountiful on Friday?
Yeah, it's, I think, kind of site dependent for me, because on DraftKings you have so many underpriced centers that even though I really like Gasol, I haven't projected to do well here. I'm just not getting a ton because most of my center position on DraftKings is either paying down or at least into the mid range, or it's Karl Anthony Towns, and that's not leaving a ton of room for me to get to Gasol. Whereas on FanDuel, I think maybe a little bit easier because Towns is a little bit priced a little bit further away from him. DeAndre Ayton is closer to the same price. Nurkic is a lot more expensive instead of being the same price. So I think that I probably will end up getting more Gasol on FanDuel than I do on DraftKings. I think it's a perfectly fine spot. It's just kind of been a roster construction casualty for me.
Same spot as you. Could Gasol put up monster numbers here? Yeah, no question. He's a very good play. But when I say monster numbers, I mean you get 50-pointer out of him. Once in a while, Gasol has that huge game, but they're kind of few and far between at this point, Adam. He's more so just a nice, consistent player that you're happy when he lands in the high 40s. Kind of another guy where I don't think, it rarely kills you if he's not in your lineup.
Right. I mean, it is about as good a matchup as you can get, though.
No question. But there's another matchup for a guy that's cheaper that is just about as good as you can get him. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, what I'm saying is he's had some stellar matchups and he has good games. He has real nice games. But that's what it's not. If Gasol was, just put it this way, if Gasol was like 7,300, 7,400, say on DraftKings, and then 77, 78 on FanDuel, I would have a ton of him. But the way just rosters or lineups are shaping up for me, I'm as of now, without a lot of this news, I'm that extra, $500-600 is doing a lot for me. So I have been dropping down to a lot of other centers.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point that I was making in our Slack. Someone had asked about centers, and I showed him, my preliminary center exposures on DraftKings, and I didn't have a lot of Gasol. And it has nothing to do with Gasol's matchup. It just has to do with my lineups end up better if I go a little bit cheaper at center.
Exactly. What do you have anything else on Memphis? Jaren Jackson, of course, coming off a strong game. The one day I'm not on him, right? The one day I don't have him as a tournament play. He did you well that day, facing Brooklyn here. Anyone else for Memphis?
Yeah, Jackson is the highest owned guy for me from Memphis in my DraftKings crunch right now. It's, again, not that you feel super confident in his minutes because they're all over the place, but the minutes should be there as long as he's playing well. And that's kind of all that you can ask for in tournaments from a guy that's in that mid 5K range that has the upside that he has. You kind of just embrace the volatility and you accept that there's going to be days where he kills you, but also know that it makes his ownership lower than it otherwise would be if you were consistent. And he's someone that can go out there and give you 40 plus fantasy points. It's a really good spot for him for the same reasons it's a good spot for Gasol. He also last game, Joakim Noah only played about 4 minutes. So you did still get some backup center run from Jackson. He played 35, 36 minutes. I'm projected for 30 here. So I think that there's even upside for him on top of what I'm projected for, and I'm getting a lot of him.
Okay. I like it. Brooklyn. Tough spot. Good Memphis defense. Slow Memphis team. Anywhere you're looking at here?
No.
I don't have a single player from this game.
No, I think I had like 1% D'Angelo Russell or something. I had like 8% Jared Allen.
All right. Yeah. Dinwiddie, his price has come down to 6,500, but I think that's kind of like a fair price, not a great price in this game. So no one that's cheap enough for me to say, I don't care who they're playing. I got to get them in there. It's just, I'm not feeling it. I'm not seeing it either. So we'll move on here and we'll talk Boston and Dallas. Boston favored by 4.5 points here at home, 212.5 total. No Kyrie Irving, no Marcus Morris. Hayward coming off his second best game of the season. His only two good games really all season have come against Minnesota. So maybe we just don't play him until he plays the T-Wolves again, which will be next season. I'm obviously joking, but I'm not joking in that guessing when Hayward's going to have himself a big game is tough. I have a feeling that you like Hayward more than I do. It's not even that I don't think it's a good spot and good opportunity for him. I'm just not sold after one good game in the last, I don't know, 2 months. That is my concern here, and it makes it so difficult to try and guess which one of him or Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum is going to have the good game and which one's going to fall flat. However, and then I'm done, Marcus Morris being out does make it a little bit easier. If it was just Irving, I would be way, way, way less interested in maybe rolling the dice to see which one of these guys would play. I'd probably just avoid him entirely. But Morris being out opens things up a lot. And now you kind of have to take some risks with this Celtics wing rotation.
Right. And the one thing that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable with Hayward, and don't confuse that with me saying that I'm actually comfortable with getting him, but without Kyrie or Marcus Morris on the floor this year, Hayward's played 210 minutes. He has a 27.5% assist percentage. So while he also does get, a boost in usage without Kyrie and without Morris, that isn't as important to me since we've just seen him be absolutely incapable of scoring at times this year. But the assist percentage increase up to 27.5% at least means that he should be a little bit more productive, in the peripheral department and a little bit less likely to absolutely kill us. So, I'm going to Hayward here. I know that it could go really poorly, but I think the numbers are the numbers.
Yeah, the numbers are the numbers. Just look at his last month of basketball. No, look, I'm with you. It doesn't feel good. I think you'll probably still have a bit more Hayward than I do, but again, 35 points, 44 fantasy points. The peripherals were once again non-existent. Hopefully we can see a little bit more action there. We're going to need it because he's not going to shoot 14 for 18 again. And if he does, well, I don't know what to just like when I'm talking about, listen, Derek White, don't expect Derek White to keep this up for long. And then he's like 7 for 9 in the third quarter. He goes out and shoots 80% again. So
and for what it's worth, like Hayward has been bad this year, but in those 210 minutes, without Kyrie or without Morris, he has averaged a fantasy point per minute. So it's not like the rates are good and he hasn't, produced. He actually has been productive.
Yep. Yeah, he's been all right. What about Tatum and Brown?
Yeah, I like all of them. I mean, Tatum is probably the most difficult to get to. I still think he's a good play, more so on FanDuel, I think. But, a 24% usage rate for Tatum, only 0.8 fantasy points per minute, but not a really high, not a big sample size there where I'm too concerned about his per minute production because of the increase in usage. Jaylen Brown, I really like, especially on FanDuel at 4,500. I expect Brown to get the start, play 30 to 32 minutes, 23.8% usage rate. And he's another one. He struggled this year, but he's averaging 0.94 DraftKings points per minute without Kyrie or Morris on the floor. And I just think that he's too cheap, especially on FanDuel, but a good play on DraftKings as well. And then Rozier's price tag is up, but with Morris being out, it just makes it even more likely that Rozier plays a couple extra minutes just as a result of Marcus Smart was the backup point guard last game. It's going to be tough for that to happen here.
Exactly.
So I have Rozier at 36 minutes. He's a point per minute guy. So, he's fine. Marcus Smart, as much as I hate him, is 4,300 on DraftKings and 4,800 on FanDuel. He is close to a point per minute guy. He's got a 20% usage rate without Kyrie or Morris on the floor. He also has a 30% assist percentage. So I'm actually getting more of him on DraftKings than anyone else on Boston.
So here's by the way, Ricky Rubio is active. Ricky Rubio is active for Utah. So no Dante Exum. So here's the thing, kind of going back to what I was saying at the top of this game. And I'm not even disagreeing with what you're saying. All I'm pointing out is, if you're playing 150 lineups, it's a lot easier to do this. But let's talk about someone that's playing 1 or playing in the 3 max. Like you just named 5 players from this team: Rozier, Smart, Tatum, Brown, and Hayward, all of whom you said have some viability in one form or another. We know that all 5 of these guys are not having a great game. I would say on average, 2, maybe 3 hit value. It's just difficult for me to say, I'm confident that it's going to be him or it's going to be him. Rozier, I think, is your best bet to not kill you. And then Brown at his price point. And then I would say Howard or Hayward. And I have them in that order. Tatum and Smart, I just think I have less interest in. Smart because he's already not a high per minute guy. And the minutes, I'm not necessarily sure what he's going to see. I'd still put him around 29 or 30. And then with Tatum, he's just the most expensive, and he has as many floor games as Brown and Hayward do. So, well, not as many as Hayward, but like a ceiling game for Tatum isn't something I'm super concerned about, which is why I don't think I'll be getting too much of him at that above 6K price point.
Yeah, I mean, for me, in order on DraftKings, it's Smart, Rozier, Hayward, Brown, Tatum. On FanDuel, it's Smart, Rozier, Brown, Hayward, Tatum.
Okay. Yeah, I just have far less interest in Smart today. And I'd rather pay a little bit extra for Brown. All right. On the other side, we've got Dallas. Been a bad team away from home this year. Mediocre overall. Luka Doncic has seen his price tag plummet recently. He was $8,700 just 1 week ago. He's down to $7,400 on DraftKings. Doncic on FanDuel at shooting guard is down to $7,800. Still not in love with him. I still think that Dennis Smith is taking away a decent amount of ball handling when he's on the floor. Kind of a Dallas team that I don't have much of anything in this one tonight.
Yeah, the biggest issue for me with Dallas outside of the matchup against Boston is that their starters tend to play like 32 minutes, 34 in good games. But when you talk about mid-range players, you can often find players who play 36 to 38 minutes, and it just makes it tough for guys like, for any of these Dallas starters to keep up. That being said, I ended up, or at least right now, have like 10 or 11% of Luka. His usage has still been there, even with Dennis Smith coming back. In those 4 games, he's at 33.5%. So it seems like he has at least taken a step forward as the season's gone on, and the return of Dennis Smith might not impact him as much as I thought it was going to. So I think he's a perfectly reasonable play. But, like you said, it's just that there are plenty of other options to go to as well. So it's not like I have him popping as one of my highest owned guys.
All right. You want to move on to the next one here?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Miami and Washington. The Miami Heat are favored by 6.5 at home, 212 total here against the Wizards. And I just want to, let's get Miami out of the way first. You have Hassan Whiteside, who's $6,800 on DraftKings, $7K flat on FanDuel. I'm going to update our ownership projections because earlier today, Whiteside in our initial ownership projection run was popping pretty high. And if that was going to be the case, I wouldn't really have any interest in playing him because I'm only really targeting Whiteside, even when he's cheap. And he's not that cheap given his playing time. I'm kind of only interested if he's going to be, kind of overlooked. But right now, we have him projected as the 8th highest owned player, 4th highest owned center, but 8th highest owned player on DraftKings, Adam. What does that do for you here at his price point?
I mean, I really, really like the matchup for him. The minutes obviously are kind of all over the place, but with Thomas Bryant playing as much as he has been, I feel a little bit better about Whiteside getting in that 28 to 30 minute range. And it's just a spot where he should really go nuts. I think he's really underpriced on FanDuel at 7,000. DraftKings, obviously the 6,800 is nice in a vacuum, but when you compare him to the other centers on the slate, it's still really tough to make him a priority play, especially if he's projected for high ownership, like you were saying. But on FanDuel, I think where he's 7K and you have, Nurkic at 9,100, he's 1,400 less than Gasol. He's, 3,600 less than Karl Anthony Towns. That's where he really stands out to me. Not to mention that blocks are worth more on FanDuel as well, so it makes him a little bit more valuable.
So how many minutes are you projecting him for?
28.
That's what I am too. I don't know, man. I was hoping he'd be a little less popular, but it's looking now like, and just from chatter around the industry that Whiteside's definitely been pretty heavy in the conversation today, which to me takes the shine off a little bit. What about and look, don't get me wrong, I talked about him in today's article. I think it's a smash spot, no question. Bryant is not the most athletic player, but he's a pretty high energy guy. He's always moving. Just watch Thomas Bryant play. He's always moving. Those are the type of guys that Whiteside is very capable of beating up around the rim. But look, I'll give Bryant credit where it's due. He is rebounding well. He's been very active on the boards, very active around the rim as well. I posted on Twitter today. I was just looking. I was watching some of his field goal attempts from previous games just to see kind of how he plays, and I can't get play type data anymore. So looking to see how often in the pick and roll, how much are lobbed, this and that, and it was amazing to me, Adam. If you look at his shot chart, I tweeted it. He all 14 shots came within 3 feet of the rim, and he was 14 for 14. Like it's crazy how he's just doing so much around the basket, which makes things interesting in a spot like this, and should keep Whiteside close to the basket as well. The only thing is with Bryant, if you look at these shots around the basket, most of them are with him rolling to the basket or following up missed shots. He doesn't just hang there. So I guess we'll see how it plays out. But it's an interesting center versus center matchup now that Bryant's getting all these minutes.
Yeah, no question. And it makes me feel a little bit better about Whiteside for that reason. Obviously Jeff Green was getting the backup center minutes last game, but I'd be more concerned about Whiteside if this were still the version of the Wizards where Bryant was playing 18 minutes and then Keith playing 30 off the bench.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about James Johnson. He was playing around 29 minutes in 3 straight games before the I think it was an illness took him out. And I'm including the 25 minutes against Orlando because it was a blowout. He was on pace for 30, actually 31, but I won't put him that high. So he played 30, then 25 in a blowout where he didn't play in the fourth, and then 29, then 8 after going out in the first half of the illness, then 17 in a blowout. Do you think he could get back up to 29 today? Because if he does in this spot, I think 3,900 is pretty reasonable for James Johnson.
Yeah, I think he could. I'm projected for 20. I think that his minutes range really is between like 18 and 30, and a lot of it will just depend on how the game's going and how Kelly Olynyk's playing, because the power forward minutes are essentially going to be split between Johnson and Olynyk in some way. Whether it's Johnson getting 30 and Olynyk getting 18, or, Olynyk getting 30 and Johnson getting 18. Johnson obviously has the first crack at it, but we've seen Spoelstra plenty play Johnson one stint to start the first, one stint to start the second half, and then, the rest basically go to Olynyk, including in the last game. So I have Olynyk and Johnson both at 24, Olynyk and Johnson both at 24 minutes. Johnson's cheap enough at 3,900 on DraftKings that's still getting him into, around 15% of my lineups right now. At 5K on FanDuel, it's completely different, and I don't really see the need to get there. I'd rather play a $4,000 Olynyk on FanDuel.
Okay. Yeah, with James Johnson, I have quite a bit of interest in tournaments because I do think this is a very appealing matchup for a couple of reasons. First one being, this is a terrible rebounding team. Another one, too, that has really struggled against power forwards. You look at Washington, no team is allowing more boards to power forwards this season. Also, the fourth most steals, the fifth most assists. You just go across the board, seventh most points. They've really struggled to front courts in general. And I think this is a spot where James Johnson, playing a Washington team that plays at an elevated pace, if he gets 28, 29 minutes, I think you could see one of these patented James Johnson, 4 steal, 2 block, 12.8 rebound games. So at that price, anywhere else for you on this Washington team?
On Washington?
Sorry, Miami.
Oh, not really. I mean, it's a good matchup. Obviously, you have price tags coming up for guys. If I get some Winslow or Richardson, that's fine, but not priorities. I do think so you talked about Whiteside's ownership. If you're going into a tournament saying you want to fade Whiteside, I think one of the easiest ways to make that a profitable move is to play Bam Adebayo, because you're going to get 48 center minutes from Whiteside and Adebayo. If Whiteside for some reason only plays 22, you're probably getting like 26 from Bam, and it's a really, really good spot for whoever's out there.
Right. I don't think it'll be high enough owned to where I got to play his backup, just not him.
Well, I'm saying if Whiteside fails at $7,000 on FanDuel, it probably means he played like 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah. But what about 25 minutes? You don't. What do you? Okay,
I don't think he fails on FanDuel in 25 minutes.
No. What do you want from him there? What are you hoping for?
Around
if
40.
he played 25 minutes, what would be enough?
I don't have a specific number, but I'm saying there's not centers in that price range that I think are in the same class as Whiteside. It's hard. If he plays 25 minutes, he's like 1.3 fantasy point per minute guy at $7,000 in 25 minutes in a prime spot. He's probably gonna do fine.
All right, let's talk about Washington. Unless you want to talk about Richardson or something.
No.
All right. I actually think it's a decent spot, but there's just no ceiling there. Washington's salaries have come up. Satoransky, 58 on DraftKings. Beal, 92. Ariza, 58. Pretty reasonable. Thomas Bryant, 6K. And then even Jeff Green's up to 5,100. On FanDuel, Brad Beal's up to 97. Satoransky's at 64. Bryant's at 69. Green is at 58. And Ariza is at 63. So I know you mentioned earlier today that it looked like you were still getting a decent amount of Bryant. Is that the case with the rest of this Washington team, or just him? Because I'm having more trouble getting to the rest of this team at their newly elevated spots.
Yeah, it's pretty much just Bryant as the only guy I'm getting a lot of from the Wizards. The price tag obviously makes me not feel great. because I mean he was 4,700 and there it was just really difficult for him to fail. Now it's a lot easier, but we're still talking about a guy who's averaging over a fantasy point per minute. He played 39 minutes last game. He played 36 minutes the game before that. He essentially has taken over the starting spot to where Scott Brooks is treating him like one of his starters, and he's just playing as many minutes as he can handle. He's been really good. He brings things to the Wizards team that they need as far as rebounding and rim protection goes. So there's reason for him to be on the floor. I still like Thomas Bryant, even though the price tag is less appealing, especially because it means that he's going to be lower owned. Like he's not going to be 48% owned like he was last slate.
Right. Jock Killiam, not being a smartass here. Why is the deeper dive on and not live before lock? Because lock is at 7:30, brother. That's why. All right. I think we could keep going here. I look, Bryant has been phenomenal lately, but when it comes to guys like Satoransky, I'd rather just pay a little bit extra for, Rozier. I'd even, if I'm living in that price range, if I need somebody there, I'd rather play Teague over Satoransky, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I've Chris Dunn ahead of him also.
Yeah, and even he's a little bit more expensive, but Bledsoe, as we get to this Atlanta Milwaukee game, he's 6,600 on DraftKings. I'm not saying it's a great price, 72 on FanDuel. Really, what this game comes down to, though, and we'll just start with this because it's important, is the Milwaukee Bucks are 13.5-point favorites. We've got a 230 total in this game. They're facing the fastest paced team that allows the most points per game, has been crushed in really almost every facet of the game defensively. With Bledsoe, with Middleton, with Giannis, if the question is, can they have ceiling games here? No doubt about it. If the question is, can they miserably disappoint you? Answer is no doubt about it. It really just depends if Atlanta can keep this even moderately close. I don't know if they can, Adam.
Yeah, and it's a tough spot too, because Giannis obviously can just go absolutely nuts here in so many different ways. But the value on this slate's just so bad that, on top of taking on the risks that you just talked about, if Giannis goes out there and scores like 66 fantasy points, the value still has to do well. Like there's enough mid-range guys with upside here that it's still tough. So I'm getting Giannis on DraftKings. I have him in about 20%, and that's about as high as I can really justify getting it, just because there's so much that can go wrong that doesn't even necessarily involve him.
Right. Exactly. And if you get Mike Conley's active, by the way, in case anybody was wondering, Justin Holiday is expected not playing. I think if I'm going here, I'd almost have more interest in a Bledsoe, just because I'm getting a good price. If he does see 30 minutes, you could see some really solid numbers. My concern, Adam, is just, Giannis is 12.5 on FanDuel. He's what is he, 11.7 on DraftKings? It's a very, very expensive price point. And you'll see his rotation, which is actually different at times each day, where he'll play 5 minutes of the first, then he'll come back in the last couple minutes, play most of the second, and then play heavy in the third. But then, play the same first rotation as he does in the third. In blowouts, you can see Giannis legitimately play like 25 minutes or so. This is the concern that I have with who is it? Who do I always talk about? Risking playing only 23 minutes, 25.
Kyrie.
I can't remember. Thank you, Kyrie. Brad Stevens does that with Kyrie a lot in blowouts and ruins what could be huge games. You could see that with Giannis, and I'm going to have some. Let me ask you if you agree with this. He's facing the Hawks. It's a phenomenal spot. Neither of us are saying it isn't. He could smash them, but at this price, is it worth going heavy ownership on Giannis, or just getting in enough to where you have some in the event that he does have a good game and Atlanta somehow keeps it competitive?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I'm approaching it. Just because, obviously he could just break the slate open, but there's just not enough value right now that I want to be having tons of him. It's kind of like yesterday, in that if yesterday had been a bigger slate, I wouldn't have had 100% James Harden, just because the value sucked. But yesterday there were only 3 games. There's only so many mid-range guys that can blow up and hurt you. So I still went ahead and played a ton of Harden and just hope for the best with the value. On a 10-game slate where there are guys, between $6,000 and $8,000 that can go score 50 plus points, if you get 22 points or something from a $3,900 guy and you get 65 from Giannis, you're probably getting your ass beat by a couple of, mid-range guys.
Yep. 20 Rick says value is good. Fuck you mean, Adam? Is it? Is it
What
though?
value? I think we're describing value differently. Like $6,100 Terry Rozier is not value in this case because he's not helping you get Giannis.
3K Chandler Hutchinson is still 3K, but he's also a 0.6 fantasy point per minute player.
Right. He's the kind of guy who, if this were the 3-game slate, like, sure, I will play a ton of Chandler Hutchison, take his 16 to 18 points, pair it with Giannis, be good to go.
It's kind of like saying value was good last night just because you're choking down Bellinelli and, not good players.
Right.
By the way, Did you get paid? Did you get paid?
What?
On your Harden bet?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Good man. He came through. All right.
Yeah.
Stand up fella. I like to see that. You're all right in my book, dude. Anyway, let's finish this out. And like I said, I don't have a problem with Bledsoe. I'm not touching him in cash because the minutes have already been a bit shaky, so that concerns me. But like him and Middleton, if they do blow him out, someone's having a big game. Someone's putting up big numbers here. It's just very difficult to say who it's going to be, and there's a good chance that none of them play in the fourth quarter. Anything you want to add for Milwaukee?
No, I agree with you. I like Middleton, Brogdon, Bledsoe. They're all fine.
All right, let's talk about the Hawks. Collins has come down $700 on DraftKings since the last game. He disappointed me for sure. He had 36.5 fantasy points. It's funny because he still averaged like 1.5 fantasy points per minute, but he got in foul trouble again against this same Washington team and only played 27 minutes. Anyway, he's still a high per minute guy, and he's 7,500. Do you have any interest in him or anyone else on this Hawks team? Then we'll move on.
More so in him than anyone, but just still not a ton there. It's just such a tough matchup against this Milwaukee defense. I think the minutes do come back up for Collins. I would love to see what happens if Dedmon and Len play alongside each other again, like they did against the Wizards. Like they'll get absolutely torched by this Milwaukee team.
Yeah.
Like Collins' minutes are fine. It's just that there's other spots I can go to.
Phoenix and the Clippers. There are 2 players I love in this game, Adam. Both, believe it or not, on Phoenix. The Clippers are 4.5-point favorites on the road. 234 total, easily the highest of this slate. I love Devin Booker against the Clippers team that's 3rd worst defensive rating over the past 35 days or 30 days and playing at the 6th fastest pace over that span. I love Booker. I love DeAndre Ayton. And I'm going to have quite a bit of them, even though they're on the Suns. It's just a very, very good spot for them. Do you share my opinion, or are you looking elsewhere at these positions?
No, I'm with you. I like Ayton. The one concern would be both times these teams have played, Boban got the start for the Clippers, and he at times has made DeAndre Ayton look like a child, and that's kind of concerning. But
he makes everyone look like a child.
I meant in terms of his effectiveness.
I know.
Yeah, but so that's somewhat concerning. But Ayton also just has seemingly greatly improved as this season has gone on. The price tag. Yeah, and the price tag just hasn't come up enough to where it should be for a guy who's averaging 1.3 fantasy points per minute over. We're getting close, 3 weeks, almost a month now. So I'm still going to Ayton. I'm with you. I like Booker. I think TJ Warren's a fine play on FanDuel. If our ownership projections are correct, I'm a little lower on him in the field, but I still think he's fine. So I'm with you. I really like Ayton and I like Booker.
I'm going to ask you a quick question so we can move on here, but Booker or Beal in tournaments? It looks like Beal has become the forgotten man ever after a couple relatively weak games, and then of course a price increase. Do you have? I forgot to ask. Do you have any interest, to make it quick, in Beal with this price hike, being that we have him at 3% projected ownership?
If I get any, that's fine, but I'm not prioritizing him. It's just the price tag's gone up. Again, value's not good enough on the slate that I want to pay close to 10K for Beal. And also Miami is a good defense. They have a coach who's smart enough to figure out how to slow Beal down as well. I think that the margins are a little thinner there than they are in some other players.
I agree with you, and he's going to have a lot more 40-point games than you want to deal with at that price. Clippers, I don't have anything here really. Do you? If there is, go ahead.
I like Lou Williams, especially on FanDuel, $6,800 shooting guard. Minutes have been up lately, 31 minutes in 2 of his last 3, 27 in the other one. So, I like him. And then I will have some Boban. I have no idea if he's going to start. I'm limiting my exposure to him for that reason. But he did start in this matchup both times they played this year. He started 3 out of the last 4 games for the Clippers. I would have thought he started against Embiid, but he didn't. So I have no idea. It's just that at 3,600 on DraftKings, 3,500 on FanDuel, if he does start, he opens up a lot of doors for you.
All right. I can't get the Harrell at his price. I just can't do it. Lakers, New York Knicks. Let's assume Kyle Kuzma's out. If that's the case, I love Ingram. I like Ingram already, but if Kuzma's out, I really, really like Ingram. Not a ton of time here, Adam. I'll toss it over to you. You know where I'm at. Let's talk about the value plays here as well if Kuzma's out.
Yeah, Ingram's my favorite guy from the Lakers if Kuzma's out. Like him regardless. Lonzo, a better play on FanDuel still than he is on DraftKings, only 6,800 there. JaVale McGee's looking really good for me. Only $5,200 on DraftKings. I'm getting a lot of him, even with him projected for like 24 to 26 minutes. Obviously in a nice matchup here. 6,500 on FanDuel is fine as well. Where I think Kuzma, it gets interesting is like Lance Stevenson is $3,700. He played about 22 minutes last game, and I can't really figure out how to get him less minutes if Kuzma's out here.
But KCP started the second half.
Right. But like I have KCP at 34 minutes, and I still have Stevenson.
So do I, yeah.
So I think Stevenson comes in as a very reasonable value play. KCP is fine. I really don't want to pay $4,900 for him all that often on DraftKings. But he's okay. I think that the Lakers are just the team that I will have. They're the only team that I have capped at 3 players per team as opposed to 2.
Me too. I'm not talking about cap, but a team that I'm going to have quite a bit of. I just don't think Kyle Kuzma is going to play.
Neither do I.
And that's what you got Stevenson cheap. I love Ingram either way. By the way, I'll make it quick. He's averaging 14 potential assists and 10 rebound chances per game since LeBron's been out. Expect to see better numbers going forward. And if Kuzma's out, you have LeBron and Kuzma, the 2 top scorers on this team out. Ingram is a top play. Absolutely. Do you have anything for the Knicks?
I like Moutier. I like Noah Vonleh. Moutier's price tag's still cheap. I think he plays around 32 minutes here. Lakers are a good enough team in terms of efficiency, but again, they just played a really fast pace. And then Vonleh is just a monster when Enes Kanter's not on the floor. And obviously he's playing more minutes without Kanter now. Even when Kornet's out there, you see a huge boost in his rebounding numbers, his assist numbers, and his usage. So I think that Vonleh is still a good play here.
All right. Last game here, then we'll turn it over to Chris and Eddie, live before lock, bring you into the weekend. Portland OKC. Westbrook's last 7 games shooting percentage, 15%, 54%, 18%, 59%, 30%, 52%, 17%. That's the case. He's on track for a good game here. I still have some interest at his price, but it's actually the only player in this game I'm not paying for George, I don't think, even though I like him. This is not a game I have very much interest in at all, Adam. Maybe you're different. You can close it out. We're at 6:30.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of Paul George because I have him projected really closely to Westbrook. He's averaging slightly more fantasy points per minute over the last month. He has a higher usage rate. He's playing similar minutes, and he's cheaper. So I'm getting a lot of Paul George. I think he's my highest owned guy from this game right now. I have some Nurkic. Obviously not a great matchup against Steven Adams, but he's just a really productive player. Paul George is the guy that I have the most of here, though.
All right. CJ McCollum is still inexpensive, but I don't see myself getting there. I prefer Ingram. That'll do it for us. Thanks as always for tuning into the Deeper Dive. And if you want a free week of awesemo.com, just use that promo code in the bottom right corner, all one word, Deeper Dive. When you sign up, use the promo code, free week. Test those waters before you jump in. We appreciate you guys. Hit us with a thumbs up if you appreciate the show and you want to see more of this content. Until then, we'll see you back here after the weekend. Good luck tonight.